Hi guys, we are going to start on the 15th chapter. Okay, December the 15th. The Christmas Mystery by Jostein Gaarder. December the 15th. When Joachim woke up on December 15th, there were only 10 doors left to open in the magic advent calendar. He didn't even have time to sit up in bed before Mama and Papa were in his room. Joachim was no longer angry because they had opened his secret box. They'd done something they had no right to, but he had forgiven them. It would have been boring to sulk about it forever. Besides, it was more fun to read about Elizabeth and the pilgrimage with Mama and Papa. It was almost like having a birthday every day until Christmas Eve. "Let's get going," said Papa. Neither he nor Mama hid the fact that the magic advent calendar was just as exciting for them as it was for Joachim. Joachim sat up and opened door number 15. He carefully fished out the folded piece of paper. The picture showed islands and reefs, with houses on them. The small islands were bathed in radiant sunshine. That day it was Papa's turn to read. He grabbed the thin piece of paper and cleared his throat twice before beginning. 6 sheep, 3 shepherds, 3 wise men, 2 angels, 1 Roman governor, and a little girl from Norway came to the lagoon of Venice at the head of the Adriatic Sea. They passed on a little rise with a view over the lagoon. And Ephriel began to point out all the small islands and reefs that studded the water. On many of the islands the Venetians had built houses, on some of them churches as well. Several of the islets were so close together that bridges had been built between them. There were small fishing boats everywhere. "The year is 797 after Christ," announced Ephriel. "We see the young Venice, which is what the 118 islands will soon be called. The Venetians settled here for protection from the sea pirates and barbarians who roamed the area. Exactly 100 years ago, they all combined under a leader who was called the Doge." "I can't see any gondolas," complained Elizabeth. "I thought there would be many more bridges too." Ephriel laughed. "But you're not in the Venice of the 20th century. I said the time was 797, and people had lived here for only a couple of centuries. But Venice will soon become so thickly populated that one island will scarcely be separated from another." While they stood looking out over the islands, a small rowboat glided by. One end of the rowboat was filled with salt. At the other end stood some sheep, bleating at the sun, which was about to break through the morning mist. The man who was rowing the boat was so frightened when he saw the procession of pilgrims that he covered his eyes with his arm, took a step back, lost his balance, and fell head over heels into the water. Elizabeth saw him come to the surface a few seconds later and then go under again. "He's drowning!" she called. "We must save him!" The angel Ephriel was already on his way. He hovered gracefully above the glittering water, seized the man when he surfaced again, and lifted him up on land. The water poured off him. Ephriel pulled on the rowboat. The man whose fear had nearly caused him to drown lay down on the ground and coughed fit to burst. He gasped for breath and said, "Grati, grati." Don't know if that's the right way to say it. Elizabeth tried to explain that they were on the way to Bethlehem to greet the Christ child and that he needn't be afraid. Ephriel had begun to circle around him. "Fear not," he said in a voice as soft as silk, "and be in no wise afraid. But you should not have been all alone in the sea if you can't swim, for you can't expect an angel to be around all the time. We only very rarely wander about, you know." It didn't look as if Ephriel's advice was of any comfort to the man, but the cherub sat down beside him patted him on the cheek, and went on repeating, "Fear not." It seemed to be having an effect, for the man got to his feet and trudged back to his boat. He lifted a little lamb out of it and walked back towards them. "Agnus Dei," he said. That means God's lamb, and the lamb joined the rest of the flock without protest. Joshua struck his shepherd's crook on the ground and said, "To Bethlehem! To Bethlehem!" They went off again. At the very end of the Gulf of Venice stood the old Roman town of Aquileia. As they ran, Ephriel pointed to a monastery. The year is 718 after Christ, but there have been Christian communities here for ancient times. The procession of pilgrims sped on through the town of Trieste. Then they continued south, across country, through Croatia. Papa put the scrap of paper down on the bed and opened one of the largest atlas that he had placed on Joachim's desk. "Here's Venice," he said, "and here's Trieste, and that's on the border of Yugoslavia. I can't find Aquileia." "But maybe it doesn't exist anymore," said Mama. "You have to look in the historical atlas." Papa went to get the other large atlas. There were many maps of all the countries in Europe, but the names of the countries and the towns were different from one map to another. "Look for a map of the area in the 8th century, said Mama. Papa turned the pages of the atlas. "Here it is! Aquileia! The old town was situated halfway between Venice and Trieste. This is fantastic!" "What is it?" asked Joachim. "John must have used old maps like this too, for the world changes all the time. History is like a big pile of pancakes, and each pancake is a different map of the world." "Pancakes?" said Joachim. Papa nodded. "It is never enough to ask where something's happening. It's not enough to ask when something's happening either. You have to ask both when and where." He put his hand on Joachim's hand. "Imagine that you have 20 pancakes piled on top of each other. If there's a black speck on one of the pancakes and you have to find that particular speck, you must find out which of the 20 pancakes the black speck is on and exactly where on the pancake. You may have to search through the whole pile." Joachim nodded, and Papa went on. "The long journey to Bethlehem goes right through all 20 pancakes, because Elizabeth doesn't just travel around on the top pancake. She's moving through the entire pancake mountain." Now Joachim understood what Papa meant. "They're traveling down through 20 centuries, said Papa finally. "There are maps in this book that show exactly how the world looked in every one of the 20 centuries. I think John must have been reading a pancake book like this." When he said pancake book, he and Joachim couldn't help laughing. The big question is whether there really was a man who was saved by an angel in Venice in the year 797. "Do you think we could find out?" said Mama. "You don't really think this story is true?" said Papa. "No, I guess not," said Mama, wavering. "But if it really had happened, the man would have talked about it to a priest, for instance. Then it would have been written down somewhere. Maybe we should search through the library." Papa wouldn't hear such talk. He said, "Let's go and have a pizza in town and visit the market afterwards." "Do you remember what he looks like, Joachim?" "Of course," said Joachim. "I'd recognize him at once. He talked with an accent, but then he probably isn't Norwegian." That day, Mama picked Joachim up at school. They took the bus to town and met Papa. From the pizza restaurant, they could look down on the market in front of the cathedral. As they ate, Papa kept asking, "Do you see him, Joachim?" Every time Joachim had to answer no, because John wasn't at the market selling flowers. They bought some special candles and a couple of Christmas presents. Then they went into the bookstore where Joachim had found the magic advent calendar. The old man recognized Papa and Joachim at once and shook Mama's hand too. "Here we are again," said Papa. "We wondered whether you had seen anything of this remarkable flower seller." The bookseller shook his head. He hasn't been here for quite a while. At this time of year, he's often not around as much. The magic advent calendar is a bit of a mystery, explained Mamma. We wanted to invite him to our house to thank him properly for it. They agreed that the bookseller should ask John to phone them. As they were about to leave, Papa said, "Just one more thing. Do you know what country he comes from?" "I think he said he was born in Damascus," said the bookseller. In the car going home, Papa drummed his finger on the steering wheel. "If only we had found that man," he said. "At least we found out where he comes from," said Mamma. "Isn't Damascus the capital of Syria?" Well, I'm so shit at geography, I couldn't tell you that. No clue. Probably. Who knows? Anyway, that was chapter 15, aka December the 15th. What I do like about this story is like sometimes a day, the real day, like not the scraps of paper are the longest, but Joachim's story as well. I love how that in the beginning there was like most from the thin pieces of paper, but now it's also the thing about finding John and finding out who he is and everything around the magic advent calendar that is just as important, I think, as the thin scraps of paper. So I do really love that. That it gradually like smooth transition between the both of them. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this, and I love you all. I'll see you later.